The city of Karvok Prime was alive with neon lights and the hum of alien voices. Crowds filled the streets, moving between glowing markets and towering structures, but none of them noticed the man running for his life. Jack Donovan sprinted down a narrow alley, his boots kicking up dust. His dark brown hair was a mess, and a fresh bruise was forming on his cheek. Behind him, 3 alien bounty hunters followed, their plasma rifles aimed at his back. "Move, move, move," Jack yelled as he dodged between 2 market stalls. He grabbed a crate of glowing fruit and hurled it over his shoulder. It exploded in a shower of sparks, slowing his pursuers for a brief moment. Ahead of him, a tall, fierce-looking woman stood with a sword in one hand and a scowl on her face. Zarin Vorka. Her silver hair shimmered under the neon lights, and her violet eyes burned with frustration. She wore black combat armor, sleek and fitted, with the golden insignia of the Vossari warrior clan on her shoulder. "You led them straight to me," she growled, flipping her sword. Jack skidded to a stop. "I saved your life an hour ago. Maybe let's not argue in the middle of a gunfight." One of the bounty hunters fired. Zarin moved like lightning, slicing the plasma bolt in half. Jack blinked. "Okay, that was cool. No time for flattery," Zarin snapped. She launched forward, cutting down 2 bounty hunters in seconds. The last one lunged at her, but she spun and slammed her elbow into his face. A sickening crack followed as the alien crashed to the ground. But as she turned back, Jack saw her wince. "You're hurt," he said. "It's nothing," she muttered, but when she took a step, her leg buckled. Jack caught her before she fell, his arms firm around her waist. Zarin hated being weak in front of anyone. "Let go of me." Jack ignored her. "Your shoulder." "It's just dislocated," she hissed. Jack raised an eyebrow. "So let me fix it. I don't need your help." Snap. Jack reset her bone in one swift motion. Zarin's scream echoed through the alley. You barbaric human." Jack sighed. "You're welcome." And then she punched him in the jaw. Jack stumbled back, rubbing his jaw. "Yep, definitely barbaric." Zarin glared at him, her violet eyes flashing with fury. Her arm was back in place, but the pain lingered. The fact that a human had just touched her without permission, let alone reset her bone, was an insult beyond words. "You think you can just," she started, stepping forward. Jack raised his hands. "Hey, it was either that or let you fight with one arm." Zarin exhaled sharply, trying to calm herself. Jack was frustrating, reckless, and far too casual for someone who should be dead 5 times over, but he had saved her. Again. The bounty hunters were gone, leaving them alone in the alley. The distant hum of Karvok Prime filled the silence between them. Jack studied her face. She was breathing hard, still tense from the fight. Her silver hair, always perfectly braided, had come loose, strands framing her sharp features. Even now, covered in dust and sweat, she looked fierce and untouchable. "Are you going to stare at me all night, human?" Zarin muttered. Jack smirked. "Maybe. You've got this whole angry warrior princess thing going on. It's kind of fascinating." Zarin rolled her eyes, but felt a strange heat in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. On her homeworld, warriors were respected, feared, or avoided entirely. Jack treated her like a person. She shook off the thought. "You should leave. The Vossari High Council is already suspicious of you. If they find out we were seen together." Jack leaned against a nearby wall. "Pretty sure they already don't like me. Something about a reckless, undisciplined Terran meddling in Vossari affairs." Zarin crossed her arms. "They're right." Jack grinned. "Ouch." She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You're impossible." Before Jack could respond, a loud chime rang from Zarin's wrist. She checked her holo-communicator. A summons from the High Council. Her stomach tightened. Jack noticed the shift in her expression. "Bad news." "The worst," she muttered. "They want me back at the palace. Now." Jack whistled. "I take it that's not a let's have tea and chat kind of invitation." "No," Zarin said. "It means trouble." Jack hesitated. He had only been in Vossari space for a few weeks, but he had learned one thing fast. Their laws were strict, their warriors proud, and their punishments severe. If the High Council wanted Zyron immediately, something wasn't right. She turned, ready to leave, but Jack reached out and gently grabbed her wrist. "Wait." She froze, not because of his touch, but because of the warmth in his voice. "You don't have to go alone," Jack said. Zyron swallowed hard. She was a warrior. She had never needed anyone. But as she looked into Jack's determined green eyes, she felt an unfamiliar sense of comfort. She pulled her wrist away, but not harshly. "I'll be fine," she said. Jack watched her disappear into the city streets, a strange twist forming in his chest. He had a very bad feeling about this. Zyron strode into the Vaseri High Council chamber, her head held high despite the tension in her shoulders. The circular hall was dimly lit, the golden symbols of her people glowing softly on the walls. Seated before her were the 5 elders, cloaked figures with sharp, judging eyes. At the center sat Elder Varkin, his deep blue skin wrinkled with age, but his gaze sharp as ever. "Zyron Vorka," he began, his voice steady, "you were summoned here to explain your recent associations." Zyron's jaw clenched. They meant Jack. "I was doing my duty," she said firmly, "eliminating a threat." Elder Varkin raised a brow. "A threat you seem to have spared more than once." A murmur rippled through the council. Zyron felt her muscles tighten. "He is reckless," she admitted, "but not our enemy." Elder Varkin leaned forward. "Then why does this human still roam free? He disrupts our order, disrespects our ways, and yet you defend him." Zyron held her ground. "He saved my life." Silence. One of the other elders, a thin woman with piercing golden eyes, scoffed. "A human? Saving one of our finest warriors? Absurd." Zyron's hands curled into fists. Absurd or not, it happened. Varkin studied her for a long moment before sighing. "Perhaps you have spent too much time among outsiders, Zyron." Her heart pounded. She knew what was coming. "You are to prove your loyalty in the trial of honor." The chamber stirred. Zyron kept her expression unreadable, though inside, her pulse quickened. The trial of honor was no small test. It was a brutal public challenge, a duel to prove her strength, her dedication to the Vaseri way. Zyron's voice remained steady. "When?" Varkin's lips curled into something almost amused. "Dawn." Zyron bowed slightly, her way of acknowledging the order. Then, without another word, she turned and strode out of the chamber. She wasn't afraid. But something about this felt wrong. Outside, the cold night air did little to ease the storm in Zyron's mind. She barely made it a few steps down the grand stone steps before she heard a too familiar voice. "Well, that looked fun." Zyron stopped, exhaling sharply before turning. Jack leaned against a column, arms crossed, his signature smirk in place. His green eyes gleamed with mischief, but there was concern underneath. "Were you spying?" she accused. Jack shrugged. "I prefer observing from a totally safe distance where I definitely wasn't caught." Zyron gave him an unimpressed look. Jack pushed off the column, stepping closer. "So, what did the wise and mighty council decide?" Zyron hesitated. Jack noticed. "Zyron," he said, voice softer, "what's going on?" She hated this, hated that he could read her so easily. "I have to fight," she admitted. Jack's brows furrowed. "Fight who?" "Doesn't matter." Jack let out a low whistle. "Let me guess. It's one of those fight to prove you're still one of them things." Zyron didn't answer. Jack sighed. "So what happens if you lose?" Zyron looked away. She didn't want to say it. Jack's jaw tightened. Right, not good. For the first time, Zyron felt something she didn't expect. Not fear, not frustration. Doubt. Jack ran a hand through his hair. "You know, you could just not do it." Zyron gave him a sharp look. "That's not how this works." Jack stepped closer, his voice dropping. "What if it's a setup? What if they just want to get rid of you?" Zyron had already considered that, but hearing Jack say it made it worse. She exhaled. "I don't have a choice." Jack studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. "I hate this." Zyron blinked. "Why?" Jack's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, without thinking, he reached out and brushed a loose strand of silver hair behind her ear. Zarin froze. Jack smirked slightly, but his voice was serious. "Because you deserve better than this." Zarin's heart skipped, just for a moment. She quickly stepped back, clearing her throat. "I should prepare." Jack watched her go, jaw clenched. He had a very, very bad feeling about tomorrow. The twin suns of Viserys' homeworld were just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the vast arena of honor. Towering stone pillars lined the circular battlefield, their ancient carvings whispering of warriors long past. A silent crowd gathered in the stands, their piercing eyes focused on the center, where Zarin stood, tall, unshaken, and ready. Across from her, her opponent emerged. Varrock, a seasoned warrior with dark bronze skin and piercing violet eyes. He was built like a war machine, each muscle refined through years of combat. His crimson battle armor shimmered under the rising suns. Zarin wasn't intimidated, but she knew this wouldn't be easy. The High Council sat in a stone balcony above, their expressions unreadable. Elder Varkin stood and raised a hand. "The trial of honor begins." A low, vibrating hum filled the air as energy barriers formed around the arena, locking them in. No escape, no interruptions. Zarin took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew the rules. This wasn't just a fight. It was a test of loyalty, strength, and skill. And then, Varrock attacked. Jack hated this. Standing in the crowd, hidden under the shadow of a stone column, he watched as Zarin barely dodged the first strike. Varrock's blade sliced through the air, a shimmering weapon infused with energy. Zarin countered fast, sidestepping, then striking with her own blade. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed. Jack clenched his fists. He had seen Zarin fight before. She was incredible. But this wasn't just a battle. The council wanted her to lose, and he had a bad feeling about what would happen if she did. Zarin gritted her teeth as Varrock swung again. She barely managed to block, her arms aching from the force. He was stronger, but she was faster. She spun low, aiming for his legs. He dodged. Then, with inhuman speed, he struck. Pain exploded in her side as his fist connected. Zarin staggered, barely catching herself before she hit the ground. Varrock smirked. "You're hesitating." Zarin wiped the blood from her lip. No, she wasn't. She pushed forward, launching into a flurry of strikes. Fast, sharp, relentless. Varrock blocked the first few, but then, her blade slipped past his defense. A clean cut along his shoulder. The crowd gasped. Zarin pressed the attack, forcing Varrock back. But then, a flicker of movement from the stands. Her instincts screamed. She barely turned in time to see a council member discreetly press something on a hidden device. And then, her limbs locked. A sharp electric current shot through her armor, her nerves burning. Her vision blurred. They cheated. Zarin dropped to her knees, body refusing to move. Varrock frowned. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't stop. He raised his blade. Jack saw everything. His chest tightened in anger as Zarin suddenly collapsed. He didn't know how, but he knew they had done something to her, and he wasn't about to let it happen. Before he even thought, he was moving. Zarin struggled to lift her arms. Varrock's blade gleamed as he prepared to strike. She refused to die like this, but her body wouldn't move. And then, a blur. A figure leaped over the energy barrier, landing hard between her and Varrock. Jack, his chest rose and fell quickly, fists clenched, his green eyes burning with fury. The entire arena froze. Zarin blinked. "What are you?" Jack turned his head slightly. "Stay down." And then he faced Varrock. "I don't care what your rules say," Jack growled, "but if you want to kill her—" His fists tightened. "You go through me first." Silence fell over the arena of honor. Jack stood between Zarin and Varrock, fists clenched, chest rising and falling with barely contained anger. The entire audience, warriors, nobles, even the High Council, watched in stunned disbelief. A human had just interfered in an honor duel. That was forbidden. "Get out of the way," Varrock growled, his violet eyes narrowing. His blade was still raised, its energy humming dangerously. Jack didn't move. No. The air was thick with tension. Zarin tried to stand, but her body was still weak from the council's interference. She gritted her teeth. Jack, you don't understand. This is my fight. Jack turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her gaze. Your fight is rigged. I saw what they did. His voice was low, controlled, but Zarin knew he was furious. Varrock's expression darkened. This is not your concern, human. Jack's jaw tightened. She's my wife. That makes it my concern. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Some gasped. Others scoffed. Zarin felt heat rise in her cheeks. He wasn't wrong. Their bond was legally recognized after their marriage rites, but hearing him say it so boldly, in front of her entire clan, made her heart race. Varrock's grip tightened around his blade. You insult our traditions. Jack exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. You know what's insulting. Cheating. He shot a glare at the council. Your little trick nearly got her killed. The High Council remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Jack turned back to Varrock. If you want to finish this fight, then fight me instead. Gasps filled the arena. Zarin's eyes widened. Jack. Varrock barked a laugh. You, the human? You wouldn't last a minute. Jack smirked. Then this should be over quick, shouldn't it? Varrock's gaze flickered to the council. Elder Varkin's expression was cold, calculating. The human has spoken, the elder finally said. If he wishes to fight in her place, so be it. Zarin's stomach dropped. No, this wasn't how things were supposed to go. Jack glanced at her, offering a small, reassuring grin. Don't worry, sweetheart. I've got this. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. The energy barrier reset. Jack faced Varrock, standing firm. He was smaller, lighter, and lacked Varrock's strength. But Zarin knew one thing about Jack. He never fought fair. Varrock lunged, his blade slicing through the air. Jack ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike. He moved fast, rolling to the side, and coming up with his fists raised. Varrock sneered. You don't even have a weapon. Jack smirked. Who needs one? He grabbed a handful of arena dust and threw it into Varrock's face. The warrior staggered back, cursing. The crowd erupted in shock. Zarin groaned. Of course. Jack didn't waste time. He rushed forward, using his smaller frame to slip past Varrock's defenses. His fists moved fast, landing sharp hits to the warrior's ribs before dodging back. Varrock roared in frustration and swung wildly. Jack bent backward, narrowly avoiding decapitation. Whoa, okay, that was close. He ducked again and drove his knee into Varrock's gut. The warrior stumbled. The crowd was no longer silent. Some cheered, others shouted in outrage. Jack grinned. Not so easy, huh? Varrock's eyes burned with fury. He rushed forward with inhuman speed, too fast for Jack to dodge. The next thing Jack knew, he was flying. Varrock's punch hit like a truck, sending him skidding across the arena floor. Zarin's heart stopped. Jack. Jack groaned, spitting out dirt. Okay, that one hurt. Varrock stalked toward him. You are weak. You do not belong here. Jack slowly pushed himself up, wiping blood from his lip. Then he smirked. Maybe, but I'm still standing, aren't I? Varrock hesitated. Jack tilted his head. You know, I've noticed something. You keep calling me weak, but you still haven't beaten me. The crowd murmured. Even the council looked uncertain. Jack took a step forward. And let's be real. If I'm this weak, then what does that say about you? Varrock's pride cracked. He roared in frustration and swung his blade. Too fast, too wild. Jack sidestepped. And then he grabbed Varrock's arm, twisted, and used his own weight against him. The warrior slammed into the ground. The arena went dead silent. Jack stood over Varrock, panting. He turned to the High Council. Are we done here? Silence. Then, Elder Varkin rose. His gaze swept over the crowd, then landed on Zarin. The trial is over, he declared. Zarin has proven her honor, and her human is not as weak as we thought." A murmur of agreement ran through the stands. Jack helped Zyron up, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You okay?" he murmured. Zyron stared at him. This man, her human, had just risked everything for her. And somehow, he had won. She exhaled, resting a hand against his chest. "I should be asking you that." Jack chuckled. I've had worse." The celebration had started the moment the trial ended. The arena of honor had turned into a gathering ground for warriors, nobles, and clan leaders. The tension from before had melted into booming laughter, clinking goblets, and lively music. Jack, still sore from the fight, sat on a raised stone ledge with Zyron beside him. He winced as she dabbed a cold cloth against his bruised cheek. "Ow, hey, be gentle." Zyron smirked. "You fought a 7-foot warrior and threw dirt in his face, but now you complain about this." Jack grinned. That was different. That was strategy. She shook her head, amused. He was reckless, stubborn, and completely insane, but he had stood by her, even when he didn't have to. That meant more than she could ever say. A group of warriors approached, their expressions mixed with respect and curiosity. One of them, a towering man with silver tattoos on his arms, crossed his fists over his chest in a formal salute. "You fought well, human," he said. "Unexpected, but well." Jack smirked. "Unexpected is kind of my thing." Zyron rolled her eyes. Another warrior, a younger woman with braided dark hair, stepped forward. "You fought in her place. You risked everything." Why? The question was simple, but the weight of it settled over the group. Jack didn't hesitate. He glanced at Zyron and then back at them. "Because I love her." Silence. Zyron's heart skipped a beat. The warriors exchanged glances. Some nodded in approval, others still seemed unsure. But then, the silver-tattooed warrior chuckled. "Then you are more one of us than I thought." A murmur of agreement ran through the group before they stepped away, returning to the celebration. Zyron turned to Jack, studying his face. "You meant that?" Jack met her gaze without hesitation. "Yeah, I did." Her fingers tightened around the cloth in her hand. She wasn't used to this. To humans, love was simple. You spoke it, you showed it, you felt it. To her people, love was war. It was proving yourself. It was standing beside someone through every battle, every hardship, every moment of weakness. Jack had done that, and yet she still hadn't told him how she felt. She took a slow breath. "Jack, I—" Before she could finish, a voice interrupted. "The High Council summons you both." Zyron turned. A royal guard stood at attention, his violet eyes unreadable. Jack sighed. "Man, can we catch a break?" Zyron straightened, her warrior instincts kicking in. "Come on." The council chamber was cold and dimly lit, the massive stone pillars towering over them like silent judges. Elder Varkin sat in the center, his expression neutral. "You have caused quite a disturbance today." Jack crossed his arms. "You're welcome." Zyron elbowed him. Varkin ignored the comment. "Zyron, you have proven your strength, and despite your humans' unconventional methods, he has also proven himself. The council has reached a decision." Jack tensed. Zyron's fingers twitched at her side. Varkin's gaze settled on them. "Your bond is recognized." Jack blinked. "Wait, seriously?" Zyron exhaled slowly. "That means—" Varkin nodded. "You are officially bound as mates. Your union will not be challenged." A weight lifted from Zyron's chest. The battle was over. Jack let out a low whistle. "So, does that mean I get a trophy or something?" Zyron groaned. The council members looked deeply unamused. Varkin's expression didn't change. "No." Jack grinned. "Well, as long as we're clear." The elder's gaze hardened. "But know this, there are still those who do not trust a human among us. Prove them wrong." Zyron stepped forward, her voice steady. "We will." Jack glanced at her, surprised by the "we." She met his gaze, and for the first time, she truly meant it. That night, they stood on the balcony of their quarters, looking over the glowing city below. The twin moons bathed everything in soft silver light. Jack leaned against the railing, stretching. Well, that was a day. Xiren studied him. He had fought for her. He had stood beside her. He had told her he loved her without hesitation. It was her turn now. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing against his. Jack glanced down at her, eyebrows raised. "What's up?" She swallowed, then gently grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him down into a kiss. Jack's breath hitched. When she pulled back, her voice was softer than usual. "I love you too, human." Jack blinked, then he grinned. "Took you long enough." She smirked. "You like a challenge." He chuckled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "That I do." As the city lights flickered below them, Jack realized something. He might be in a world full of warriors, traditions, and insane battle customs, but he wasn't alone. And he never would be. Jack barely had time to enjoy his victory before a new problem landed right in his lap. He had survived a brutal arena fight, won over Xiren's warrior clan, and even gotten an official mate status from the High Council. But now, standing in the Great Hall, he realized something terrifying. Xiren's mother was here. Lady Karina, the matriarch of the Valkyrie warrior caste, sat on the throne-like chair at the head of the room. Her long onyx black hair was braided with silver chains, and her violet eyes practically glowed with intensity. Even without armor, she radiated authority. Jack had fought battle-hardened warriors, dodged plasma blasts, and outrun bounty hunters. But nothing, not even the sharp end of a Valkyrie spear, prepared him for meeting his alien mother-in-law. Xiren stood beside him, her posture stiff. Karina's gaze swept over Jack, her expression unreadable. "So, you are the human my daughter has chosen." Jack cleared his throat. Yeah, that'd be me." Silence. The tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. Then, Karina rose to her feet. "Come with me." Jack blinked. "Wait, what?" Xiren tensed. "Mother, what are you?" Karina held up a hand. "I must see something for myself." Jack glanced at Xiren, then back at Karina. "Okay, but if this is another prove-yourself thing, I'm fresh out of fight energy." Karina smirked. "No fighting, just a test." The test turned out to be a feast. Jack sat at a long table, surrounded by Valkyrie nobles and warriors. Giant platters of alien meats, glowing fruits, and bubbling drinks covered the surface. It was a tradition, Xiren explained. A meal shared with the matriarch was a way to judge a warrior's worth. Jack could handle weird food, but the real challenge. Karina sat directly across from him, watching his every move. "So, Jack," she picked up a goblet. "Tell me, what is it you see in my daughter?" Jack nearly choked on his drink. He glanced at Xiren, but she looked just as startled. He set down his goblet. "Well, she's strong, smart, and absolutely terrifying in a fight. But more than that, she never backs down. She fights for what she believes in." He met Xiren's gaze. "And she doesn't let me get away with anything." Xiren flushed slightly. Karina was silent for a moment. Then she smirked. "Good answer." Jack sighed in relief. Maybe he'd survive this after all. Later that night, Jack and Xiren stood on the balcony of their quarters. "You survived," Xiren teased. Jack ran a hand through his hair. "Barely. Your mom is scary." Xiren chuckled. "She is the strongest warrior of our people." Jack leaned against the railing, glancing at her. "So, did I pass?" Xiren stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. "She likes you." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That was her liking me?" Xiren smirked. "If she didn't, you wouldn't be standing here." Jack swallowed. "Noted." She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss against his lips. When she pulled back, her violet eyes held something deeper. "You're part of this now," she whispered. "Our traditions, our people, my life." Jack cupped her cheek, his voice softer. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And for the first time, Xiren knew this human was exactly where he was meant to be. Jack stood on the balcony, looking out at the vast city of Valkyries. The twin moons shone down on the towering crystal spires, their reflections dancing in the rivers of silver light that ran through the city streets. Even after everything he had been through, he still couldn't believe he was here, married, technically, to a warrior princess. Zirin joined him, her violet eyes studying his face. "You are thinking too much again." Jack smirked. "Hard not to. 1 minute, I was a random engineer fixing starships. Now, I'm part of an alien warrior clan. Your mother tested me, your people nearly killed me, and I've eaten things I don't even have names for." Zirin chuckled. "And yet, you remain standing." Jack turned toward her, taking in the way the moonlight highlighted her sharp, elegant features. He had always thought she was beautiful, fierce, proud, and stubborn as hell, but also breathtaking in a way that made his heart race. "You're not mad about today?" he asked. Zirin tilted her head. "About what?" Jack scratched the back of his neck. "You know, the fight, the broken arm thing." She crossed her arms. "You mean when you reset my bone while I was mid-battle?" Jack winced. "Yeah, that." Zirin stared at him for a long moment before sighing. It was barbaric. It was painful. Jack's shoulders slumped. "But," she added, stepping closer, "it was effective." Jack blinked. "Wait, you're saying I was right?" Zirin narrowed her eyes. "Do not push your luck, human." Jack laughed, then hesitated. "So, what now?" Zirin considered his question. "Now you adjust to your new life. My people will expect much from you." Jack let out a breath. "Great, no pressure." She smirked. "And I will train you." Jack froze. "Train me? Like in hand-to-hand combat?" Zirin nodded. "You are strong, but you fight like an earthling. If you are to stand beside me, you must learn our ways." Jack groaned. "Why does everything here involve getting punched?" Zirin laughed, a rare sound that made something warm spark in his chest. She placed a hand on his chest, her voice softening. "Because warriors do not run, and neither do you." Jack met her gaze. "Not from you." She studied him for a moment before stepping even closer. "Then you are ready." Jack swallowed. "For training?" Zirin smirked. "For this." Before he could react, she grabbed his collar and pulled him into a kiss. It wasn't gentle. Zirin was never gentle, but it was real. Jack wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in as the city lights shimmered around them. He had fought, struggled, and nearly died multiple times, but somehow it all led to this moment. Maybe he was crazy. Maybe he was in way over his head. But if this was his new life, standing beside the most incredible, stubborn, and beautiful warrior he had ever met, he was ready.